Dr. Marc Gee, welcome to the podcast today. So great to have you here.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so you are the superintendent of the Middleton School District. And how long have you been in that position?
This is my fourth year.
Fourth year.
Yep.
Okay. And where did you come from prior to this?
So I started my education career in Sugar City. It's actually where I grew up, Sugar City, Idaho. It was a great place to start my career. I kind of got to start with people who taught me. And it was a fun experience there. But I went to Sugar as a teacher, and then I became an assistant principal part-time there, and then I became a principal of an elementary school there. Then I took opportunity in Garden Valley, and they took a chance on me for a year to be the superintendent, principal, federal programs director. I didn't drive bus, but they took that chance on me as a new person, and I did that for a year, and then a job in Preston opened up. And for my family, it was a good opportunity. I'd grown up in Sugar City, but my mom grew up in Logan. I went to school at Utah State, and go Aggies. And my wife and I just thought that would be a really good place for that time of our kids' growing years to be in that community. And Preston was wonderful. But that year that we were in Garden Valley, we spent quite a bit of time in the Treasure Valley, and we really fell in love with a lot of what the Treasure Valley has to offer. And so we knew that we wanted to get our kids, the older kids, through in Preston, so we did that. And a job came open in Middleton. And Middleton's kind of that sweet spot for me because I grew up in a farming community, grew up in Sugar City. My house growing up, I had fields behind it. But here, as I was coming into town, the first time I went up to the high school, drove less than half a mile, and all of a sudden I'm in fields again. And I thought, no, this is the right place. And so it's a larger school district, has a lot of opportunities, more opportunities than some of the smaller districts just because of its size. But we're able to keep kind of that small town feel. And that's kind of what I really have loved about being in Middleton. So I was in Preston for 6 years as a superintendent. Now I'm in my fourth year. So with the 1 year in Garden Valley, I've been a superintendent now for 11 years.
Okay, so you got some experience there.
Yeah, moved around in the state a little bit, but it's been good to be able to see different parts of the state. Haven't been up north yet for a job, but been up there, and it's beautiful.
So one of the things that you just mentioned, and I think the context is really good, as you said you were in Garden Valley and you're like, I did this, and this, but I didn't drive a bus. Tell me why you said that, because that's good.
Well, I think in the smaller schools, people wear so many hats in a smaller school. And the smaller it gets, the more hats individual people wear, because it takes that much. It takes people filling certain roles in order for a school to run. No matter the size of school, you've got to have a special ed director. No matter the size of school, you've got to have a lunch program. And so maybe you've only got, in Garden Valley, we're, 70 kids, 72 kids, something like that. 170 kids, sorry. But it's small. And that's K through 12. It's a K through 12 school, and then they've got a little one-room schoolhouse out in Loman, which is awesome.
That's the red schoolhouse.
Yes, the red schoolhouse in Loman.
Yes, I love that building.
It is awesome.
So darling.
I walked into that the first time, and there was a bank of computers sitting next to a wood-burning stove, which was, and I don't know if that's still how they have it set up, but it was just quite the dichotomy there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so everybody wears a lot of different hats. And so as the administrator there, I was the superintendent, but I was also the building principal. So you have the day-to-day disciplinary things, curricular things, that kind of stuff. But you also have all of the state reporting, all of the requirements to make sure that we're meeting the criteria and following the law and all of that from the superintendent role. And that, trying to balance all of that. I actually taught a class one semester, one period, one semester, taught a math class. And, it's for me, I loved it because it keeps all your days are different. And that's one of the things I like about administration. You never have the same day twice. But because there's so many hats. And so I really have a lot of respect for the small communities and how they keep their public schools running and running smoothly, because it's a very different experience to be an administrator in a small school as opposed to a larger school. And we're not even, Middleton's a large school, but it's not, you put Middleton next to Garden Valley, it's huge.
Right.
But you put Middleton next to West Ada, it's very small.
Right.
And so, like I said, I kind of like the niche that Middleton fits in there.
Yeah. Well, Middleton is, you got about 10,000 people out there, right?
Right. Within the city, yeah.
Within the city, yeah.
Yep.
And I live in Middleton. That's the size of community that I grew up in, was 10,000 people. And we had one high school. And so that's sorry, I'm like, I don't know what's happening with my voice here. So anyways, it's a great size, to your point. Yeah. But you had mentioned the school bus driver thing, because there are some superintendents in the state of Idaho that also drive a school bus sometimes.
There are. I know. I can think of 3 off the top of my head that have said that I know one that was when they were getting their CDL so they could go and drive a bus if they needed to. I know one that drives pretty regularly. I know one that is available just as a substitute, so that if they need it, that superintendent can jump in. And I don't think people realize that, especially in those smaller communities, how many things like that different people do. And it's not just the superintendent. Sometimes it's a principal. Sometimes I know that there was a principal in another district that lived nearby. That principal was the one that plowed the parking lots, shoveled the walks, everything, because there was only so many. There were a couple of buildings, but there was only one maintenance person. So the one maintenance person took the other building, and the principal took his building. And he would get in the plow and plow the parking lots. Then he'd shovel the walks, and he'd start at 3 a.m. on a day that it was snowing, just because that's what somebody needed to do it. And I think that, and I like that. I like that somebody needs to do it. Might as well be me. Mm-hmm. I'll step up. And you have people stepping up all over the place in small schools saying, I know that I'm probably not going to get compensated for this. A lot of people aren't even going to know that I do it, but somebody needs to do it, and I'm willing. And I like that. I see that all over Idaho.
I agree. Like, there is at my kids' high school, there was, they don't get to do this anymore. I found out this year, this teacher doesn't get to do this anymore because they switched bus driving services. So, but prior to the switch, he was a teacher who would a government teacher who would take his kids once a year down to the Capitol. And as you know, it costs money to go on field trips, right? Like, it's not just like saying, okay, I want to go to these 3 places and it just happens. It's like, oh no, there has to be a budget for the bus driver, for the bus, all the things. And I have learned that that's not cheap. That's actually not a cheap thing to do. So this teacher got his CDL so that as the teacher, that was one less thing he had to ask the school district. So he would drive his government kids down to the Capitol.
Absolutely.
And when I found that out a couple of years ago, because my oldest son had that experience, I was like, as a mom and an Idahoan and someone who, to your point, really values values work and values people just stepping in and, getting things done. I really appreciated that perspective from that teacher. He wanted, ultimately in my mind, I was like, he's trying to remove this barrier of being able to take his kids down to the Capitol.
Right.
And I feel like, to your point, we see this all over Idaho. We see our public servants, people who are working in this field, doing those types of things because that's where their heart is, especially, particularly in our school communities. I see that.
Yes, absolutely. I just can't speak enough good about the people that do those kind of things. You talked about the bus driver. I see coaches doing that all over the place. Coaches that is like, well, okay, if I want my kids to be able to do this and we want to be together as a team and be able to get there, it's going to help everybody if I get that get that CDL, and they go and they do it. And it happens across. It's, bus driving is one of those things that, you almost, I say it as a joke that I never had to drive the bus, because it's something that I don't know that anybody really ever wants to. I think they do, but I don't know. Bus driving is stressful.
Oh yeah, like
you have all of these lives in the back, and you're trying to drive and pay. If you think about, okay, I'm going to drive and be safe and pay attention to the road. I'm driving down this road, but I've got all of this activity going on in the back of this bus. I've got 30 to 50 kids on here. And I mean, that's a stressful thing that I just don't think it gets enough credit. And I think that's why a lot of times when I think about it, well, I don't drive bus. It's not like I've drawn the line there. It's, I don't have the Constitution. I've never had to do that, so I don't. Thank goodness there are people that do that.
Oh yeah, and I've had a conversation with someone about, the different people within a school community, like when I think about it this way. And I have so many actually wonderful memories of being on a school bus as a kid. And I mean, I lived out in the country. And so I was on the bus for like 45 minutes, sometimes, one way. And those school bus drivers, I think I probably only had 3 the entire time, my K through 9th. I started driving when I was a sophomore. So these experiences with these bus drivers, I can still see these moments. And something that was really, something that I really appreciated, my youngest daughter, we switched her school, so she's not riding the regular school bus anymore. But somewhat recently she was home and some of her friends were getting off the bus. And as the bus drove by, the bus driver waved to her and was like, hi, like, hi friend. And said her name. Yeah. And I was just like, what? I'm so grateful for people who want to really like personalize what they're doing and are really in it for kids. Like, yeah. I mean, I looked at that bus driver and I thought, that bus driver is in it because they care about kids. And this is their way of being a part, it's a job, but it's also this way, their way of being a part of a school community. I just kind of like treasure those memories.
Yep, for sure.
Okay. So Middleton School District, you've got, I was just actually at like one of your school board meetings.
Yes.
And this was something, people say different things about schools. You hear different things all the time. And one of the things that I hear sometimes is that our schools are failing our kids. It's something that I hear. And, I've heard some really great rebuttals to that. But so first of all, let me be clear. I don't think that's true at all. Right? I don't think that our schools are failing our kids at all. And one of the things that I really enjoyed during your school board meeting was that you made made a presentation to the board regarding just kind of highlight bullet points from your elementary school, your middle school, and your high school. So will you talk about some of those like highlight bullet points? Because I think it's so important to share that information with our community.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And that's not something that happens in every board meeting, but what we were doing, and the board was going to be kind of processing through my evaluation during that meeting, during an executive session. And so one of the things they asked for was kind of and I don't want to call it the state of the district or anything like that, but it was a kind of a year in review, a calendar year. What were things that had happened? And as I started this is the first year we'd done that. And as I started pulling that together, it was really good for me just to gather all those things together, because the day to day, you sometimes will, because we're not perfect as a school system. I mean, we've got things to...
I think that we should throw that word out, because the word perfect, because people say it like, and it's like, well, we're not perfect. And I think to myself, that's like not even the goal.
Right.
The goal is, in my mind, to just continually strive for excellence, like, continually improve and grow. Not one human being is ever going to be that. So nor is an entity.
Right. And I can't ever say to somebody, well, you're the one that I'm not going to pay attention to today. Or you're the one I'm not going to get it taken care of the way you want it to. But because we sometimes get pulled into that idea that, okay, well, here's the problem that happened today, and here's the problem that happened yesterday, and here's what's on the horizon tomorrow, and we start going into that, we sometimes lose sight of the good things that are happening. And so it was kind of this idea of let's pull together what we see as some of our successes. And so when you look at, for instance, when you look at our graduation rate, we're at the top. We're near the top of the Treasure, and I'm talking Treasure Valley. We usually do our comparisons between ourselves and schools within the Treasure Valley, but we're near the top of that.
It was 90. I have it like pulled up here. 93.3%
Yes.
is your graduation rate.
Yes, and
that's
fantastic. Mm-hmm. It is fantastic, and even our alternative school is close. I want to say it's close to 80%, in the 70s. That percentage that they're graduating, those alternative school students are students that would not have graduated had we not had that alternative school program. The kind of second chance or the last chance got almost in the 70%, and that's high for if you look across alternative schools in the state. There's a few that are higher than Middleton, but overall within the state, that is very high and very commendable. So you've got those kind of graduation rates of the number of kids that are finishing, completing, and heading out to whatever future they're going to look at. When you look at our test scores, again, ranking up there, oftentimes we're coming in below West Ada, but we're flip-flopping with Boise, and then we're at that top range. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what our teachers are doing. They are moving our kids in the direction of success. And that, to me, is the most important thing. When you look at our activities, one of the things our high school principal has done, one of the things our middle school principal is doing, is trying to create opportunities and activities for our students to be a part of. Because what we find, and this is, I think anybody who thinks about it would understand that this would make sense. When students are engaged in something that they feel a part of a team or a group within the school, they're going to do better in their school. So they're going to do better in their classwork. They're going to do better. They're going to have less behavioral issues where they're acting out in ways that we have to address because they feel part of a group. So our high school principal, Johnny Hullinger, middle school principal, Mark Hinkson, they are working on ways to build the number of activities that our students can participate in. And what we're seeing is higher and higher numbers of students participating. Now, Middleton is successful in a lot of activities, and I mean, I couldn't even start listing, the accolades that our athletic and activities programs. I mean, a couple of years ago, we had kids placing second at nationals in FFA and things like that. These are amazing opportunities that our kids have had. But for me as the superintendent, I'm always excited when our kids succeed, win the game or whatever. But it's more important that they're participating, that they are feeling a part of a group. For me, that is what needs to be happening, and that's the most important thing is, do they have ways to participate? And then when we get down into our elementary schools, this year, several of them instituted what's called the best day of school ever. And, and what it is, it's just a day to celebrate what the kids have done up to that point, and it's a day to have a little bit of fun. And I remember walking into Purple Sage Elementary on their best day of school ever, and the kids were walking around, and they were going from station to station. The stations were in different classrooms, and some of them were learning activities. They were shooting rockets out on the playground. They were, all kinds of different activities. But the kids were going around, this is the best day of school ever. And it was so fun. And we need to have those days where we're in the classroom, studying, focused. But there needs to be days where kids can be kids. And helping, and when kids feel like there's things like that coming, they're willing to do even more in the classroom because they're excited about what could come. And it just creates a culture in that school. We have some of our schools the elementary schools do daddy-daughter dances and mom and son activities. They have carnivals. And while all of that's going on, they're teaching them how to read. And our kids are learning how to read. And our kids are learning how to do math. And they're learning, even at the elementary level, they're learning basic scientific principles. And are we perfect in it? No, but we're doing, again, Middleton within the Treasure Valley, ranking higher, right up near the top of the schools within the Treasure Valley. And they're doing a great job. And again, are we perfect? No. But we do it. We have teachers that are spending every day looking for ways. Right now, we've got a bunch of aides in our schools that their specific job is to take students that are struggling reading and getting them to the point that they're either hitting that proficiency level or that they're making more growth than what you would expect. So what you're looking, when you see a student come in as a second grader, you expect them to start at a certain level and you hope that they're going to get to this level. So there's kind of this growth curve or growth line that you're looking for. What we're looking for with those is to steepen that line and to get more growth than what you would expect because we're giving extra interventions. And that's what we've found is happening this year. We're seeing more of those students get that growth in their reading skills, in their math skills, that they wouldn't have gotten had we not given that extra intervention. And when you make those gains early in a child's career, educational career, it pays off huge down the line because when they're able to read, when they're able to do math, they're able to do better in social studies. They're better able to do the homework that comes from any class. So, it's really fantastic to see what the efforts and you from the superintendent role, you kind of look down. I don't look down. That sounds so wrong, but you look at the whole picture, and you know where you want it all to get. But within that picture is just a million little things that our teachers are doing, a million little things that our parents are doing with their kids, and those collaborations with the parents and the teachers and the kids. Million little things all coming together to say, when this student reaches 12th grade and they graduate, they have the world in front of them. Because for me, that's the key is when a child graduates, do they believe they can go out and do whatever it is they want to do? If they've got kind of a narrow focus, I have always wanted to be a doctor and I'm going to be a doctor, and they graduate from high school believing that they're on that path and having built that kind of resume behind them, great. If they finish high school and they're like, I'm not sure what I want to do, but I know I could do this, or that. To me, that's the success. Because if a kid comes out and says, I really don't like this thing but I guess that's what I'm going to do. I think that's where we've not measured up the way that we wanted to. But all these little millions of things add up to a child leaving, every child is one child leaving and saying, I know I can do this. And that's what and that's one of the reasons graduation is such a fun time. To see that culmination of the work they've done for 13 years.
I love what you're saying about, you're kind of talking about a lot of different things, but one of the things that I pulled out in what you're saying is like one thing that's so important for kids. And I actually had a therapist on here and we were talking about this, that people in general, we need to be connected to ourselves and we need to be connected to other people. That is a basic human need. And what you're describing are both of those things that as a child in the Middleton School District comes to your school, you want them to be connected to a group, to the team that they're on, to the classroom that they're in, to the teacher that they have, right? To the activity that they're a part of. Middleton School District wants that child to feel that they are connected to their school community. And the second thing that you describe is that when you're saying we want kids to leave with the belief that they can go and do the thing that they want to do, or they have the belief that they're going to be able to figure that out, or they have the belief in themselves that they have the skills required. In my mind, that is a connection to self and a solid sense of self. That belief, like that solid sense of self, that confidence to know that they can go out into the world because this school experience has prepared them to do that. That's incredible. I love that you're saying that. That's so important.
Well, and it's exactly where we're at, because you brought up the words they believe they have the skills, and for me it's not just they believe they have the skills, they have the skills necessary to make that next step. And whatever that step is, and I think that's another step forward that public schools have taken over the last 10, 15 years. When I was in school, as I was going through, now, and this may have just been the way that I perceived school, but I went through and it was, I'm going to try and take the most advanced academic course that I can. So I was looking for those AP courses, the dual credit courses, anything that said advanced on it, I was trying to head towards that. And I looked at, and this was naive and immature of me, and I guess that's the time to be that. But in high school, I looked at some of the career technical classes as, well, you know, if you can't do the academic thing, that's where you might end up. You know, you might have to be a welder, a whatever. And could I have been more wrong? I mean, one of the things that we're seeing now, and what I've watched schools do over the last, like I said, 10 to 15 years, is recognize that there are valuable and viable careers within so many more areas than just this strictly academic focus. We often think of schools as math and reading, or math, reading, and science, or 3 R's, whatever you want to say. It's rare that the first thought you think of when you think of schools is building a shed. It's rare that the first thought you think of is a culinary arts class. But these are some of the career paths that our students are going to take that are viable career paths. We want to have those AP classes. We want to have that high academic process for those students, that it's going to help them get where they want to go. But some students want to be a carpenter or a contractor or an electrician or a cosmetologist. Thank you, cosmologist. Yeah. Cosmology.
I get the words.
It's a different place, but
the words are tough sometimes.
But you have that, and so you've seen schools go back to this idea that there's a lot of value in those CTE programs, and that's something that we've been trying to expand in Middleton. In fact, today, that we're recording this today, we're doing a groundbreaking for a construction classroom. So it's going to have a big construction shop, carpentry shop, and a classroom next to it. We're going to have that over by our middle school, and students from our middle school, our alternative school, and our high school all can come to that school to get a little bit of, for middle school, they're going to be kind of exploring that, those types of careers that come in the construction industry. High school and alternative school students, they're out there. They're going to be. We've been building sheds. Our goal is to get to the point where our kids are building houses, and I feel like there's just such a value there. And it's not just that. We're expanding our sports medicine. We're expanding into our nursing programs. We're trying to build a computer science program. We have existing business and culinary arts programs that we're doing. Our FFA has always been a strong CTE program within Middleton. And all of these programs have tremendously viable and important careers that our kids can be a part of. And the more that we offer those kind of things to kids, the more they're going to finish saying, I know I can do what I want to do, and I can make a career out of this. And not only that, I got the skills to do it. Some of them, they're going to finish with certificates that say that will get them into jobs. We have one student doing an apprenticeship that just started this a month ago, an apprenticeship that he's going to be paid $28 an hour while he's in high school, getting credit for doing the work at a sheet metal fabrication shop. And he's going to move right from that into a career where they're going to pay for additional education, additional ways for him to move up within within that career. And he's starting that as a 16-year-old kid. That to me is where education needs to be going. It's those kinds of opportunities where when the kid is motivated and knows where they want to go, we've got an avenue to help them. If they don't and they need to explore, that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with using that time in high school to explore. We have such a breadth of opportunities to offer them.
So did you say, no, so super wonderful about that student, like that's way awesome. Very, very cool. Did you say that your middle school students are able to explore some of these CTE courses?
Well, we haven't done that a lot, but that's one of the reasons for the location of this CTE construction shop, and we're calling it our career campus. It's the first building of our career campus. We're going to see how that expands, but one of the points of putting it there is that it's close to our middle school, it's close to our alternative school, and we'll be shuttling students from our high school. All of those students can participate. But yes, a middle school student can come and have an experience where they're not going to build the sheds, but they're going to learn what that industry could be and maybe spark an interest when they're in middle school, so that when they get to that freshman year, they can start planning out their time. And that's one of the things that we're trying to build within our programs is kind of these journey pathways, my career journey. And I'm going to start it in 9th grade. And if I know that's something I want to go down, I'm going to tell the counselors that at the beginning of the year of my freshman year, and they will kind of hand me a roadmap of how I could do it. Customizable along the way, not locked in, but if this is where you're thinking right now, here's the roadmap. Oh, you want to go into engineering instead? Okay, here's a different roadmap for you. And I think, again, our job as kind of the guides on the side while they're learning is one of the most enjoyable parts of being in public education.
So I just want to make note that is actually very forward thinking and for your school district to have middle school kids participate in the CTE. We don't see that very often. I don't know if I've ever seen that. Is it in Idaho already?
It does. In some, like in Preston, we had our FFA it was primarily our FFA, but we had our FFA students come and be a part from middle school come up. But a lot of times it's the travel that kind of makes it more challenging. And it's not like we want necessarily our middle school kids to be right there with all of our high school kids. There is some wisdom in keeping some of that separation there. But the more we can do it, the more we can spark the interest. And I mean, I think we all know how our middle school age students are. They are trying to figure out who they are, what they want to be, and you never know, every child is so different. You never know what's going to spark an interest and lock them in. Because a lot of kids, not every kid, but a lot of kids, once they kind of lock in, I've watched kids sometimes be a behavior problem. They always getting into trouble and maybe not doing well in school and all of those kinds of things. But then it's like a switch flips and because they lock in on, oh, okay, that's what I want to do. All they needed was that purpose. They needed to know, I can do that. Oh, okay, it all lined up in front of me. There's a pathway for me. Now I'm a little bit too focused to get in trouble. I'm a little bit too focused to not do well in school because I know I've got to do well in school to get where I want to be because it's clicked with them. The more we can do that with kids, the better. And so providing those opportunities, and again, we've got great school counselors, principals that are that's a big part of what they're trying to do is create those opportunities.
So, and I think, to add to that, one of the things that I've thought about is that if a kid knows how to succeed, they will succeed. To your point, when a kid's kind of, maybe just over in an area and they're not quite sure what they want to do, but then they see a pathway and it like clicks for them and they go, oh, and then it's like they've finally seen it and they're going to try that thing and they're going to, so I think that's valuable. I think even as like adults, that sometimes like when I'm looking at kids through my experience of being an adult and starting out in education, there is something about just remembering that like if kids aren't quite maybe, behaviorally making the best choices, it's not because the kid is rotten. It's because that kid hasn't quite figured out yet how to make the best choices to be successful in that area, right? And having that patience for them. And I think that's why there's so much value in what you've described in what the Middleton School District, is offering, and even other, the districts around the state.
Right. It's not unique to Middleton by any means.
Right. But providing these opportunities for kids so that they can be successful, right? So they can develop that belief in themselves and they can develop those skills and they have those practices, right? And now, wow, look, I can have a pathway, I can see some things laid out in front of me, right? Providing all of those things for our kids, because in my mind, like kids are at the center of the school community.
Right. No, absolutely.
So, okay. So one of the things that Middleton has like coming up, I mean, you're talking about your building, groundbreaking CTE building. Congratulations. That's super awesome.
And I should say we did that because we got grants and donations, and that's paying for the bulk of that building. I mean, we R&M Steel donated all of the steel for this building. Wow. And it's a steel building. So, I mean, it's a pretty significant donation. We appreciate that. But the Idaho Career Ready Students grant, we were able to be one of the recipients of that grant, and that's helping us do that. And so it's not a cost to our taxpayers to make that happen.
Hey, that's awesome. I always like it when a school district is creative and looking for ways to fund the things that they need. And I know that other people feel that way too. Yeah. Because the reality is that how Idaho has set up our taxes and our property taxes and how we do, school, one of the, we don't get money to build new buildings from the general fund. Right. The way that Idaho has it set up is that it's the local community who funds the buildings.
Correct.
In essence, last year they did set up a plant facility fund, House Bill 521. We know that, that came through. And ultimately what that was the state said, okay, we're going to provide school districts an opportunity, if they meet these markers, to be able to access a specific amount of funds over a 10-year period.
Correct.
So if you reach that fund if you reach your limit in 2 years, you don't get any more in those
Correct.
8 years. And that amount isn't based on like how early you apply. It's not based on how well your students are doing. I mean, there is a formula, and part of that is, I remember one of the lawmakers who were supporting it, they said, I want to send the money where the kids are, essentially. And so some of our Treasure Valley schools actually, sometimes when we're talking about school funding and, the funding formula and all different things, they'll use the phrase, just for people who are listening, winners and losers,
Right.
and they use these phrases like, well, if we do the funding formula this way, then we're going to have this many losers and this many winners, meaning they're going to get less funding maybe
Right.
than they normally would. So ultimately, with this plant facility fund, there were some school districts, quite frankly, who made out better than other school
Correct.
districts. And so, for example, like the Salmon School District, I know their school community, when they were running their bond a year ago in May of 24, their community said, we can fund $20 million. That's what their community said.
Yep.
They could support. So that it passed in their community, which was amazing. But I think it was going to cost them like $28 million or $26 million. And they're only getting about $2.5 million from the state, I believe. And so they still have to fundraise for those last few $1 million. And I know that there's some bills working their way through right now in the legislature. Some lawmakers, especially the representative for Salmon, they're working to try. There's a there's some additional money. So they're trying to get access to that, which I think is great. And I appreciate those lawmakers who are doing that. But to that point, to my point, funding a building doesn't come from the general fund. It comes from the local community.
Right.
And so one of the responsibilities, and I think it's important to kind of differentiate this, the responsibility of the school board is to determine if they want to go ask the community to fund a project, and that comes out in the form of an election. Like the community has to vote whether they're going to say yes or no to the bond.
Correct.
And the school board members on their own time can go out and tell people, we want you to vote yes for this thing.
Right.
A school board member can do that. In the state of Idaho, it's set up that school employees, when they're on school time and they're on, like they're contracted, they're not allowed to say those things.
Correct.
They have a neutral stance. They can tell you what the bond is. They can tell you all the facts and details, but they can't tell you yes or no.
Right.
And so I really want to kind of like lay that out there as we're having this part of the conversation,
Right.
because I don't want people to think, why isn't he telling me that I should vote for this? Because
Right.
that's not what you're going to be doing
Right.
today. As the superintendent, you don't get to tell people how to vote, that you want them to vote yes or no. That by law, you're not allowed to do that in Idaho. So, but what you are allowed to do is talk about the details, the specifics of the bond, specifically what's going on in your school district.
Right.
And so that's what we're going to talk about
Awesome.
at this point. I just kind of wanted to lay
Yeah,
that out,
no,
lay the
perfect.
groundwork, if that's okay.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that, because a lot of people don't understand. If I were, because you look at these things, because there's an election, you kind of think of it as a campaign leading up to the election. And, there might be a campaign for and a campaign against, or if it's two candidates, those two candidates, they're certainly plugging for themselves and saying, we'd like you to vote for us. Within the school environment, because and I think it goes back to the idea, we're being paid with public funds. We can't use public funds to ask people to give us more public funds, that kind of thing. But we do need to make sure that they are informed. And that's a balance that we try to play. As I talk to my teachers, I say, you can't talk to your kids. I mean, you can answer their questions. They ask a question, you can answer it. But you can't be advocating for this bond with your students. You can't say, hey, kids, go home and tell your parents, vote yes. That's just not something that we can do. And for a teacher, that contract time is pretty set. We expect you to be there at 7:30, leaving at 4:30 in Middleton. In those timeframes, let's not be campaigning. Once they're out of that, on their own personal time, they can go out and do those kind of things. A superintendent doesn't really have hours. And so it's kind of, I set myself as, I've always got to be in that mode of, I can give you all the information. You've got to decide how you're going to vote. I'm going to respect whatever you have decided. I just want to make sure it's informed. Because of all the things that people can do, I think the most important thing when we're voting is to do it informed. If you go, let's say that we're trying to pass a bond for $40 million. $40 million is what is actually on the ballot. But somewhere out there, I heard that they're really asking for 60. Mm-hmm. I don't like 60. And you come to the voting booth and you say, I'm voting no. I heard it's 60. Doesn't matter, if we've not informed ourselves to know that it's really 40, well, that causes a problem, because now you're voting on something that's not even real. And so for me, that's where I feel the most responsibility, is to make sure that the information that everybody has, that they're using to make their decision, is as accurate as possible, and as I guess, a lot of breadth to it. I want to make sure that we're covering all our bases in some of the conversations that people have, because there are misconceptions, and I try to make sure that I'm clearing up misconceptions, not as a misconception meaning you're wrong to vote no or wrong or right to vote yes. It's, I want to make sure you're using the right information to make your decision. So that's kind of what we're about.
Yeah. And, I was on the Middleton School Board, and, we ran a bond when I was up there, and it was really great. But one of the things that I learned was that there had been, a few failed attempts prior to that. And it's interesting because on the very first like when they allot like the 4 that they think of in their time frame, I had a school board member tell me, he's like, we ran, he wasn't on the board at the time, the board ran a bond, and he said, really, the bond was kind of like for this Taj Mahal high school, just had every single bells and whistles feature in it. And he was just like, the community said no, and they had good reason to say no. Mm-hmm. And I think and it's not that the school board was doing anything that was wrong, right? But maybe they hadn't been, at that time, they hadn't been connecting with the community enough. I'm not sure. I don't know the details of that. But what I do know is that from those times that they made those attempts, the school board learned and they heard what their community had to say. And so when we presented that final one to the community, it was like, yes, this is the right thing. And the community was very supportive. 75% of the community said yes. And I think that that's because there was this, the community, they had tried. There was, some dialogue back and forth. There were some adjustments that were made. And sometimes I think it's like this, hey, when we have an idea, we throw it out there and then we get feedback from people, right? The idea grows because the group is kind of, adding to that, the pool of shared understanding. And so that's something that I think, is important too. So in the picture of Middleton specifically, because Middleton has made an attempt before, and you guys have learned and heard. And so in this request that you're going to share in a minute, I think it's important for people to know that you have made some adjustments because you've been listening to your community and you want to really bring, in some measure, like the best deal, right? Everyone, like I'm a person, I want a good deal.
Right.
Bring the best deal to your community. Those are my words, not yours.
Yeah.
Just to put that out there. But talk about the details of the bond so people understand.
Please. So I kind of think we got to start back when they first started talking about the bond in Middleton, and that was back in 2015. And what they were seeing, they didn't have the number of students enrolled at the time, but what they saw was subdivisions being approved. And they could see that there was a good possibility of something coming on the horizon. So they started looking in 2015 at different designs, locations, those kind of things, putting that together. And then in 2018, they actually tried it 3 different times. At the time, you could run it in March, August, May, and November. Well, I can't remember which one they skipped. I think it was March, May, and then November is what they tried. And actually ended up going down each time. They made a few adjustments to their proposal, but it was essentially the same thing as they were moving forward. And then there was a little kind of a lull in that, and there was a lot of different things going on in Middleton at the time. But then in 2022, I got there in fall of 21. Fall of 22, we tried to run the bond again. When we ran it with an elementary school, and we ran it with some repairs to our Heights Elementary School, and then we ran it with a CTE building on there. And because we thought all of these things were things that we could do, and that CTE building would not just help us expand our CTE offerings, but kind of prepare us with more seats at the secondary level for the future when the number of students that are in our elementary schools were moving up into that high school range, that they would have that we wouldn't have to automatically just go and look for some new middle school or high school. We'd have some seats available. So we were looking through that. When we did that, it was, I want to say 54 million was the ask, and it was about $161 per 100,000 was going to be the impact to the taxpayer. So have a house of $300,000, it's 161 times 3, whatever that is, 483 or something like that. So that would be that tax impact. And even then, that was going to be a lower impact than what it was going to be with that high, because we're still paying off that high school. So it was going to be lower than that. More people had moved in, so it was going to lower that tax amount. But our patrons came back and said, that's not what we want. 53% approved, but we need 66. And 66 and 2/3.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a super majority.
You can't miss the 0.6 there. But when that happened, one thing we wanted to make sure we were clear with our community is we respect your decision. We are a function of the community. We're not doing school to you. We're working together with you. We are a function of you. So you told us no. We said, all right, thank you for considering. We're going to have to do something different. And we had to do something different because we do have an issue. We've got 145% of capacity at Heights Elementary. We've got 5 portables at that building. We're at 114% of capacity, 6 portables at Mill Creek Elementary. 22 classrooms right now of our students are in portable classrooms, not regular classrooms. Those portable classrooms don't have restrooms. They have to go in, with the exception of one that we were able to put right next to the building. We were able to get some plumbing in there. But the rest don't have plumbing, so the kids have to go in the building to do that. And when we put portables in, it doesn't increase our cafeteria size, doesn't increase our hallway size, our number of restrooms, doesn't increase our gym size, our library space, all of those things. It just makes it harder to move that.
So, and describe why that matters. Like, say why that matters, because I think that's important, that picture.
Well, for instance, let's take the cafeteria as an example. I think that's a good example. We've got a school with, let's take Heights Elementary. You got 10 classrooms right now that are outside the building. So that building was meant, and I'm missing the number of classrooms inside the building. I want to say it's around 25, somewhere in there. But let's say we've got 25. The building was built with a cafeteria large enough to roll those 25 classrooms through the cafeteria in a regular, at a reasonable time. So you might start lunch at 11 o'clock and end at 12:30 or something like that. In that amount of time, you could get all those kids through. But now we've got 10 more classrooms that are all trying to fit into that same cafeteria space and roll through lunch at the same time. When you've got that many classrooms, there's just not space. You can't put them all in there and pile them up. You can't pile them high and deep. It doesn't work. So we spread it out longer, which means you start your lunch a lot earlier and then you end your lunch a lot later than what you would normally do. And the more portables we add, the more classrooms we add, without adding additional cafeteria space, we end up with an even longer situation there. And you might say, okay, well, add on to your cafeteria. Well, we have to get a bond. We can't. We don't have the funds to be able to use to build. That would be another cafeteria, or expanding a cafeteria would easily be several $1 million just to do that project. We would have to run a bond for that kind of thing to happen. And if we're going to do that at all of our elementary schools, we might as well just build a new elementary school because it'll be more efficient use of the dollars. I think that's one example. But another thing, we do a lot of extra things, like those interventions with reading, students that are reading. Well, you typically will pull those students into a separate space to do that, because that allows the classroom, the general classroom, to continue working on what they're working on. You pull this student aside, but there's no places to pull aside to. They're doing these things under stairwells and in the teacher's lounge. And before we got the portables in at Mill Creek, they were using the teacher's lounge as a classroom because there just wasn't a space. But we had that number of kids. And so it's just it's a challenging situation to put those students in. Even think about, we didn't have a lot of days with snow this year, but a student that's in the farthest portable, farthest away from the school, that is now having to trudge in to use the bathroom, and then trudge back, going through the snow to be able to get there. But even just the distance going there, we try to keep our kids safe. We have people watching. We have people out on the grounds at all times. But that's still a child that's moving from a space to another space out in the open when not everybody else is around. And that's a harder situation. And so what we have to do then, we have to pull staff to be monitoring those situations when kids are moving back and forth, which means they're not helping kids learn to read. They're not helping kids in the classroom because we don't have the money just to hire somebody just to be the person who watches kids go back and forth in the school.
Well, and even if you did, I mean, there's a lot of vacant positions in those like para-professional,
absolutely,
classified positions.
It's hard to get them to come along. So these are all challenges that come with that, and it's why we look for a new building. We could just make a portable city. But I think everybody would see that and recognize that that's not the best way for a kid to learn. A portable city is not the best way. It's a way to hold us over until we can get kind of that critical mass of community members and tax base so that the impact is smaller. And I think we'll talk about this here in a bit, but that tax impact has been kind of a focus for us in what we're trying, and part of the targeting is we've been preparing this bond.
So, okay, so let's move right into that because you guys have been, the school board has, been preparing, these different things, and they're going to take this to the taxpayer. And, and so what are the particulars of that bond request? Okay,
so first I'm going to just say the things that we kind of changed. Because that'll lead us right into that. We did do a lot of outreach when the last bond didn't pass. Just wanted to ask, why, and people didn't want to necessarily admit to the superintendent, well, I voted no. Some of them did. They were proud, and that was great. But some said, look, I could see the need for the elementary school, but I couldn't see CTE as a need. I felt like that was a want. So that was why I voted no. I absolutely could see the elementary. I just couldn't get behind that CTE building. Others were saying it was just an overall too big. The impact to my taxes was too large. There were a lot of those kind of conversations. So we said, okay, well, what we're going to do, we're going to go back to the drawing board. Scrap all the plans that we had, scrap all the everything. We actually started all the way back to selecting a designer and a builder. They had previously selected a designer and a builder who were wonderful, and I don't want to disparage them at all. They did everything we could have asked them to do, but it was all selected 10 years ago by somebody else. We felt like it needed to be a decision of the current school board who was elected by the current people that are living within their boundaries. So we went through that process again. They could apply again if they wanted. But in the end, we selected two new folks. LKV Architects and ESI Construction were the ones that ended up being the selection of the schools. We moved forward with that to design a new school, a different idea of the school, and that included finding a new site. The site that we were on had about a 20-foot slope from one end to the other, which when you were talking about dirt work over 12 acres, moving that amount of dirt to make it so that the school was on the right kind of foundation, it just wasn't going to work without multiple $1 million. I mean, we're talking $3 to $4 million just in the dirt work to make that happen. And not only that, with some of the sewer system issues in Middleton, we were going to have to put a lift station in to make that site work, the one that we had. We thought, well, there's got to be a better place. And we found a developer that was willing to donate property to the school district. And that property was essentially flat. The developer was going to bring all the utilities to the site, saving millions of dollars, both in the site acquisition as well as the preparation for the school. So that was a huge thing that we did. And again, it was all directed at trying to get the cost down. Then as we looked at the school design, we were looking at ways to economize, and instead of 3 wings, we were doing 2 wings. Instead of offset pieces, we were going to do a straight shot, because all of those things are just more efficient ways of building. We're looking at the cost of masonry and lumber. So right now, it would be better for us to have less masonry, more lumber. So just the cafeteria and the gym are going to have the masonry. The rest of it is going to have the lumber built. Changing the roof type to be kind of a flat membrane type roof, and we're going to put all the HVAC equipment up there. Again, some efficiencies that allow us to get the cost down. But it's still going to be an expensive school, because we're trying to build a 72,000 square foot building footprint. And when you're building that, it costs a lot. So we were up in the 25 to 28 million range is where we ended up. And we said, okay, if we can do that up to 28 million, the board then decided we're going to put $8 million of those modernization funds that you said were passed by House Bill 521. We're going to put $8 million of that towards this elementary school. Now, we can't put all of it, because they took some of the maintenance funds that we had in order to do that, in order to make that money work. So we can't just give it all to the elementary school, because if we could, it still wouldn't pay for the whole thing, but it would lessen it even more. But we felt like we could take $8 million of that, it's about half of the total amount, and put it towards that elementary school. All of that with the goal of getting what we're asking of our patrons to under 20 million. And that's been the goal from the beginning. It needed to be under 20 million, because we knew that was going to have a greater impact on the taxes. So we're going to be asking for 19.9 million from our patrons in this bond, and that translates to $34 per 100,000. Now, I think it's important to remember we were at $161 per 100,000, and that was still a good deal, but we knew we had to make a significant cut to that. So by pulling all of those things off, except the elementary school, and focusing in on what we could do to get that cost down, we got it to under 20 million asked from the patrons, and at $34 per 100,000. So in the same way where it was going to be like $483, it's going to be right around $100 for that, that $300,000 house. I don't know that $300,000 houses exist necessarily, but
yeah.
But that's the idea behind it. It's like a 79% reduction to go from that 161 to 34. And hopefully that's going to make a difference for a lot of our folks. But not only that, it's getting developers to be a part of this. We've got that land donation, but we've also got other developers that are donating. I just signed an MOU with a developer the other day for another $250,000 that will be donated to the school district to help with our building costs. These are things that I think we need to make sure that we recognize, because we can't do impact fees. Wish we could, but we can't. State law doesn't allow it. We've tried to pass that. We've tried to get legislators to carry those bills, and they have not carried it. Until that happens, it's illegal for us to try it. So what we're doing is trying to get them to participate and collaborate with us, and that's where some of that has come.
So where can people go then? Because I know you guys were going to have some informational evenings so people
Yes.
could see the material, like pictures, understand, and I think probably have like your architect there or some people to answer questions.
Yep, and we held one of those just the other night at Mill Creek Elementary. We've got another one next Wednesday on March 5th at Heights Elementary. We're going to be providing, it's at 6 o'clock there in the library at Heights, and the architect will be there, the builders will be there, I'll be there. We'll have other folks there trying to give any information. Essentially, we'll kind of lay it out the same way we've kind of done here, but then be there to answer questions, because a lot of people have questions. And more than anything, like I said, my job is to make sure we get all of that information out. And it's got to come. I mean, at some point, we want people to either ask me, ask their neighbor. We have a website it's right on our website. It's msd134.org/bond. You can go there and get the information, and we're going to be filling that as these months roll on towards the election. Another thing that we're trying to make sure that people understand is that absentee ballots, early voting, that's a good way to cast your vote, whether it's a vote in favor or against, because the vote is actually going to happen the last week of school. Canyon County, I mean, they set the election date as May 20th. So right last week of school, early voting, absentee ballots are a great way to make sure that you get to vote so that it's not along with all the craziness that comes in that last week of school.
So are there other things, like, are you planning to have other informational things, like, as you
Yes.
move through the month of March and April and May?
Yes. So one of the things, and this is a big part of what we're going to be doing, because honestly, these bigger meetings that we say come to the school, they're not always well attended. I think it's both. Sometimes people just have their minds made up already. Why would I go to an information meeting if my mind's made up? I think sometimes it's just I don't want to do that face-to-face thing as much. So we've got a couple things. There are several different Facebook groups that are active within Middleton. We just got the first one lined up yesterday. I don't have a time and everything yet, so I won't put that out right now. But we'll be doing Facebook Live events with those groups. But then we're going to try and do what we call cottage meetings. And cottage meetings are, you know a lot about cottage meetings. I know that Dr. Donaldson up there in Lewiston did a lot of those. But it's essentially that idea of someone invites some neighbors to their house, 8 to 15 people, we step in and we give any information that they need. And again, it's not a vote yes thing. It's a let me answer questions. Let me help you understand why we're doing this. And then so you can make the decision. And then I feel like in a smaller setting like that, when it's maybe in the clubhouse of a subdivision or somebody's backyard or their garage. I mean, I know we've got a couple set up that are in somebody's shop, when we come into those kind of environments, people feel a little bit more comfortable to ask the question. They might not want to do it. I think sometimes people think of these meetings that are more the public meetings that it's you're coming down, you're going to walk down the aisle and stand in front of a microphone with people shouting one thing or another on the other side. Obviously they never come to that. But I think that's something that doesn't get people excited about coming. But when it's just my neighbor's shop over there. I go over there all the time. We just chew the fat anyway. I'll just go over for a few minutes. Those kind of things, I think, are a little more responsive way to be able to share that information. So we've been challenging people to set those up. And we've got a calendar set up. We've just got essentially every night from, about 1st of April through mid-May. We just got every night of the school week just kind of blocked out, and myself, my assistant superintendent, my board members will just kind of start saying, okay, we've got one scheduled here, who's going to take that? Got one scheduled here, who's going to take that?
So, and if someone's interested in hosting one of those, what do they do?
They just email me,
okay.
MGEE at msd134.org. Say, I'd like to set one of these up. We don't care how many people come. Right. It doesn't. There's not some critical mass that it has to be this many people or we won't come. You tell us you'd like us to come and share information with you. We'll be there no matter how many people are there. Just the people in the household, even though they've invited others, end up coming. We'll spend some time with you and share. And we feel like that's just a way of trying to. It's not necessarily knocking doors. That's not something the district would necessarily do, but I think as a district, it's a nice way, and I know that other districts have found some success, at least in getting the message out there.
Yeah, because you want, I mean, and to your point that you've, said many times, you want people to be informed. You want them to be informed so that they can make an informed decision. That's,
Correct.
Ultimately what we want. And yeah, when I was in Lewiston, we had those cottage visits, and Bob would go, and sometimes school board members would go. And then they also had, in Lewiston, there were, community volunteers that ran a campaign. They said yes for Lewiston. But then one of my favorite things, I'm like totally into alliteration, was that sometimes in the morning, like at a coffee shop or somewhere, Bob would go, and so they called it Bagels with Bob, and I loved it. I was like, I love Bagels with Bob. But I think it's a couple of things. One, I've hosted those at my home, and to your point, they're super simple. You don't need that many people to do that. And I think it's nice because I think sometimes people do get a little nervous asking their questions. And I think one of the things that's like actually kind of cool is like when people are curious and they want to really make sure they're understanding all the different components. It's like, well, bring your tax sheet. I mean, we're all getting it right now, right? Because like, tax season's coming up, like and so it's like, bring your tax form down. Like if you want to understand what those things are, you can answer those questions for them, help them understand what their exact cost would be, right? Per tax year, per month, kind of breaking that down. I always felt like it was really nice to kind of break that down so people could understand that.
Right.
And then it just is I don't know, like to your point, I just think there's so much value in people asking the question to understand. I can still remember seeing this guy come to a meeting, and he was an older gentleman. He had his, tax form, and he was like, I'm here for some answers. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's so fantastic that you have come because you need some answers to your questions.
Right.
And so, I always encourage people to go get the information so that you can make an informed decision. That's just so important. So I also think it's important though that people understand that you as a superintendent are out there to just answer the questions, give the facts, not tell people one way or the other. But there is, there are a group of community members who have volunteered to run a campaign. And it's important to know that that's separate from the school district. The school district's not running that. You're not running it. Community members are. And so they will see that out there. Right. And they're great people to talk to too, because they definitely have a viewpoint. And, they've got they're going to be able to answer questions too, but also to encourage people to vote. Yes. Ultimately, I also think it's important for people to just vote. Like in the US, like in Idaho, like we just don't have enough people that vote. There's a bit of an apathy in thinking that like, well, my one vote doesn't matter. And what I do know, and that I have seen around Idaho, is that one vote does absolutely make the difference.
Times. I can't believe how many times it's a one vote that makes a difference, both in elections for office as well as bonds and levies. So many times.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible. Like reading Idaho Ed News sometimes, and you go through, sometimes they'll report it. And I just think like, oh my gosh, 1 or 5 or 10. It's like, no, your voice really matters here in the state of Idaho. And that's actually something that I love about Idaho. It's that coziness. It's that like, no, our votes really matter. And I know sometimes, people, it's so interesting. I kind of find politics interesting and policy and admin interesting. I mean, I'm studying it. So, but the idea that so often people get caught up in that national scene, and certainly national politics, influence and impact Idaho. But the thing that actually impacts us the most, and where, when we think about like, where is most of our government occurring? Where do we mostly experience our government? It's on the local level. Right. That's that's totally where it is.
Absolutely.
And so that's where your voice matters the most. Yep. And I think it's so important for people to understand that.
Oh, absolutely. And Canyon County has traditionally higher turnout than a lot of parts of Idaho. Just this past November, Canyon, I think, was second highest in the state in terms of turnout of registered voters. But in our last election, it was down in the 20% range of registered voters. This was the last school bond election. And so, no, we need people to come out and exercise their right to vote. It's one of those, and my dad always said as I was growing up is you can't complain if you don't vote. Now, can they complain? Yes, they can always complain. People can complain about whatever they want. But his point was, you should be willing to go and cast your vote. And then if it doesn't go your way, you still have the right to complain, but at least you did your part. And I think that on both sides. I think the people who are voting no and the people who are voting yes. And I think sometimes people think somebody else will do this, or this is a no-brainer. Of course they're going to do this. But it's not. If you expect somebody else to do it, I mean, what is it, that old adage? Somebody thought everybody was going to do it and ended up that nobody did it, you know, and I just think that that's too bad because you're missing out. And honestly, you're missing out on being a part. Because the way I see this, we all have benefited at times from wells we didn't dig. We all have benefited from people's sacrifices years before us. The schools we've gone to, the roads we drive on, all of these things that we have that are these public services are happening because other people before us made a decision that those things were important. This is an opportunity to be a part of that, to create part of our own legacy for our time now. That when we drive by, I still remember, and I was a kid, so I wasn't paying taxes at the time by any means. My parents were. But the school, when they built a new school in Sugar City, I still call it the new high school. I mean, it's 40 some odd, I don't know, 30 years old. But the new high school, I remember that I got to go in it, and I was part of an elementary group that sang at the dedication of the Sugar Salem High School. And I always remember that. And even though I made a career, and my career was partially there, I was still tied to that school because I was there and a part of it. I would bet there are people who have those same stories about Mill Creek Elementary, that they remember when it was built, that they remember when Heights Elementary was built. And it's a way of being a part of something and watching that go up and say, yeah, that took, maybe that was a sacrifice for my family, the taxes that we had to pay. Maybe it wasn't that big a deal, but I went out and helped, knock doors to help people get that. When you see that building starting to rise up, I imagine you have the same feeling for Lewiston High School.
Every time I'm there.
You think, I was a part of that. I was a part of helping this become a reality. And there's some special feelings that you have when that happens, when you're a part of building something. And there's a lot of things that tear down in our world today. I love the opportunity to be a part of building something and saying I was a part of that brought so much good and positivity to the lives of little kids. To me, you just can't get better than that.
Yeah. As you're talking, I am remembering when I was a senior in high school and I grew up in Oregon. My husband's in Idaho, and I always feel like I have to say this. My husband's in Idaho and my kids are sixth generation, but I grew up in a small town in Oregon and coastal town. And when I was a senior, they knew that they needed to bond to make some major improvements in the high school that had been built a long time, decades before. So a couple of school board members came in. I was in my leadership class. I was on student council at the time, and they came in and were talking to us about why this was important. And as a senior in high school, I remember thinking, whoa, this isn't going to benefit me at all, but I care about my community. I care about this high school that I've spent the last 4 years in. And so I remember as a senior in high school, we did a few things outside the classroom to help pass that bond, and it did pass. Now that was, I'm going to date myself here in a second, but did I graduate 24 years ago from high school? Did that mental math fast enough. 24 years ago. And the teacher that taught history at the time, he'd been my history teacher my junior year. He is now the principal of that high school. Okay. And so I went back over the summertime because I was at home visiting some family. And so I went back and he gave me a tour of the high school. And I hadn't had one in 24 years. And they had just recently also passed another bond to make some additional changes. They, updated it even more, made it a little safer, all those different things. And I will tell you, as I was walking around that school, it was both like thrilling for me, connective. I'm saying not both. It was several: thrilling, connective, and also emotional. Like I walked around that building and I just felt so much pride for the thing that I'd been a part of 24 years prior, but also for the people who came after me, who were taking care of that building, who cared about what was happening in there with those kids. And as I was talking with the principal, who is a friend of mine now, and he's been the principal for 13 years, I was like, gosh, this school really benefits from someone who cares also, who's here leading, who's making, as he was walking around the school, he was so proud to show me the things that they had done within that school to make improvements. And to your point, it was incredible to be a part of, and it's still incredible to think about it today, both my, high school from my childhood and also the Lewiston High School. I mean, I was just up there a couple of months ago by myself. I was like making a tour of the state, and I stopped off and I took some pictures and walked around, and they've added some sport facilities now to that high school. And when I'm there, when I stand there and I look at the high school and I see how beautiful it is, and, everyone cares about their thing. One of the things I like to make sure is that it looks pretty. I want to always make sure it looks nice. I have such a sense, I experience such a sense of gratitude for that community, for the people who turned out, who participated in all the different ways, and the 75% and even the other percent that didn't support it, in the way that it was like, listen, we're all a community here and we all benefit or don't from the choices that we make together. Yeah. And there's just so much value in feeling like we're in it together. Yep. I think that's so important with a school community.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's what I feel like I've heard you say as you've, spoken about the Middleton School District experience, is that you as the superintendent, it's important for you to feel like, hey, we're this community. We've listened to you, we've collabed with you, and we're trying to make and present, we're presenting a plan that we feel brings those voices together.
Right. Yeah. Right. And that's absolutely what our goal was. We didn't feel like we could just ignore, we could have finished that bond in 22, gotten 53% and said, okay, what do we have to do to convince, 13% more people to vote for this? Maybe we should just focus on this person. And we look back and no, we've got to think of this as a whole. This whole group of people made a choice. They came out to vote for one, which thank you, everybody who voted in 2022. Yes or no, thank you. But they made a choice, and that should tell us something. As a school district, we have to hit this bar, and I can sit and complain about a 2/3 majority and all of those kind of things, but it doesn't matter. They made a choice. Now we have to adjust. Now we have to say, all right, here's what we can do. We've heard you, we've heard you, we've heard you, we've heard you. And there are some things we can't do. I've heard several people say, what about those impact fees? I've done what I can. I'll keep fighting that fight, but it's not there. That's not the reality. I wish it was. So, but it doesn't mean I didn't hear. It's just I couldn't do anything about that. But I can't do something there, but I can do something about how many projects there are. I can do something about the cost, how much money we're taking from the modernization funds. I can do things to make this a more palatable thing for our community. And then the idea is we're handing it over. And that's for the next 3 months, we're in the process of handing this to our community so that on May 20th, they can say, yeah, this works for us, or it doesn't. And it's kind of, it makes me tired thinking about the next couple of months, but at the same time, I'm excited about it. I love, I got a call just yesterday from, an older couple in our community. They're in their 70s, and they said, we just want to help. How can we help? And they made some donations to the community group. They said that some things that they're going to do with their neighbors and things like that. And, I love that. I love that they received a thing in the mail that said there'll be a bond coming. And they said, you know what? That's important. How can I help? Mm-hmm. And that makes me feel good. To the same point, had a person call and say, can you help me understand why you're not having the developers do more. And I thought that was a great question. Right. Thank you for calling and asking the question, because that's what we do in a community. And again, it's all about community, bringing us together. That's why I love Middleton. I love that it's just so small, even though it's big. I mean, it's kind of the we're even though we're big, we're still feeling small, because there are good things that come from that small community feel. And in my mind, let's take all the benefits from being a big community and all the benefits from the small, tight-knit community that we can get. And then, I mean, who wouldn't want to be a part of us?
Right, right. Well, I always close the conversation with, like, each person has a takeaway, like, something their takeaway from the conversation. And so I usually start, so I'll just go, unless you would like to go first. Good. Okay. So one of the things I'm taking away from the conversation is this sense of community. And some of the things that you talked about in the very beginning of the conversation, where you said, you know what, it's so important for us to have kids that are connected to themselves and the belief and the skills that they develop in school. And then also with their peers, with the teachers in their classrooms. And one of the things that I also know is true, though, is that I met a gentleman the other day who looked at me and he was like, "Hey, you're that lady. Like, you did that podcast with the principal." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is darling. I'm having a moment here. You made my day." Yay. And so I'm always so curious. I'm always like, "Oh, what'd you think?" Like, oof. And he was like, "You know what?" He's like, "I listened to that episode." And he said, "I am about to not have any kids in this school district anymore. My kids have grown." He said, "But I still care about this school district, and I want to do something that shows a support, like, from the community, just like adults in general, to the high school, like to the school. What can we do?" And he said, so I got on the phone and I called the principal, and he's like, "We've been talking about this." And what he said to me was just so inspiring, that it was like, whoa, he really feels that sense of community. And I think there's so much beauty in that. And I feel like that's what you've really been talking about. One of the things that you've been talking about, and I'm really like taking away from this conversation today, is this sense of community that like is in Middleton, and that desire to connect with the community and to inform the community and to help the community make good informed decisions.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And what I've taken away, and it was something that I haven't really articulated, but was that idea of building. And being a part of something. I mean, I've always thought that, but it's not something that I've really articulated. But I was thinking of your experience with Lewiston and the experience you shared with your high school when you were growing up. My experience with being a part of the dedication ceremonies of my new high school, and just that feeling of being a part and what it does for me when I see it. And when I go back to that school, I'm still proud of that school. I'm proud of Sugar Salem High School. And I get the sense within Middleton that people are proud of Middleton's community. And this is just one more opportunity to come and say, no, I was a part of that one. I was a part of seeing something grow. And just, I love the idea of building and growing. I mean, almost every house, until this house that we're in right now, every house that my wife and I have purchased has always been a fixer-upper. And I love the idea of building and growing things and making things beautiful from whatever you're handed. And I feel like we do that well in Middleton, and I think this elementary school is just one more opportunity.
I love that. Thank you. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. And I wish you all the best in your community as you go out and share information so they can be informed to help them make this decision.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Alexis. I sure appreciate it. It's been good.